The silence stretched across the tarmac like a held breath. Four Navy SEALs stood motionless beside their transport helicopter, their eyes locked on the approaching FA-18F Super Hornet as it taxied through the Afghan dawn. The jet's engines wound down with that distinctive whine that usually meant routine, another pilot rotating in from carrier duty, another face they'd forget by next week. But something was different. Something that made Staff Sergeant Marcus, Reaper, Valdez lower his rifle and squint harder at the aircraft's nose. There, painted beneath the canopy in faded blue letters, were two words that shouldn't exist: Ghost Rider. Valdez felt his stomach drop. That call sign had been retired 3 years ago when Commander Jake, Ghost Rider, Morrison went down over the Helmand province. Morrison, the SEAL officer who'd pulled half their unit out of hell during Operation Red Wing II, who died trying to extract a downed pilot from hostile territory. His wingman had painted those words on his jet as a memorial, but that pilot was supposed to be dead too. The canopy cracked open with a hydraulic hiss. A flight helmet emerged, then shoulders, then the unmistakable silhouette of a pilot climbing down from the cockpit. But as the figure pulled off the helmet and shook out shoulder-length auburn hair, the SEALs exchanged glances. This wasn't the grizzled veteran they'd expected. This was a woman, maybe 30, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from surviving things that killed other people. Lieutenant Commander Kestrel Phoenix Nakamura stepped onto the tarmac and surveyed the four operators with eyes that had seen too much sky and not enough sleep. She'd flown 18 hours to get here, island hopping through 3 time zones because someone in Washington had decided her particular skill set was needed for an operation that officially didn't exist. "You gentlemen waiting for someone." Her voice carried that slight hoarseness that came from breathing oxygen at altitude, but there was steel underneath it. The kind of steel that didn't bend under pressure. Valdez finally found his voice. "Ma'am, we were expecting. That is, we thought," he gestured toward her aircraft. "That call sign." Phoenix followed his gaze to the nose of her jet and something shifted in her expression. For just a moment the professional mask slipped, revealing something raw and unhealed underneath. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I know what you're thinking, and you're right to think it." The morning sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the airfield as the most dangerous mission any of them would ever attempt began with a dead man's name painted on the side of a jet that shouldn't have existed, flown by a pilot who should have been forgotten. The radio in the operations tent crackled to life across the base, carrying a transmission that would change everything. "Phoenix, this is Overlord. Your package is ready for pickup. Time to bring our boy home." Phoenix pulled on her flight gloves with deliberate precision, each finger finding its place like rounds sliding into a magazine. The SEALs had stopped pretending not to stare. In the harsh morning light, they could see the details they'd missed before. The slight scar running from her left temple to her jawline, the way her eyes tracked movement with predatory awareness, the small silver wings pinned to her flight suit that marked her as something more than just another Navy pilot. "Ma'am," Valdez began again, his voice carrying the weight of unasked questions. "That call sign on your bird." "Ghost Rider was my flight lead," Phoenix said, cutting him off without malice. 3 years, 2 months, 16 days ago he went down trying to extract a pilot from a hot LZ in Helmand. The pilot was me." She paused, letting that sink in. "Jake Morrison saved my life that day, cost him his." The admission hung in the air like cordite after a firefight. Technical Sergeant Liu Dragon Chen, the unit's communications specialist, stepped forward. His usually impassive features showed something approaching recognition. "Phoenix, Jesus Christ, you're the Kandahar ghost, the pilot who got lucky," Phoenix interrupted, but there was no conviction in her voice. "Wrong place, wrong time, right friends." Staff Sergeant Tommy Wrench O'Brien, the team's explosives expert, whistled low. "Lucky my ass. You're the one who flew a damaged Hornet through a sandstorm with a busted navigation system and landed on a carrier in 8-foot swells. In the dark, with battle damage." His Boston accent thickened with respect. "That wasn't luck, ma'am. That was flying." Phoenix's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd spent 3 years trying to outrun that story that night, the weight of survival when better people hadn't made it home. "What matters is the mission. You boys ready to tell me what we're really doing out here?" Petty Officer First Class Dante Prophet Williams, the team medic and longest-serving member of the unit, exchanged a look with Valdez. Prophet had been in the service when Morrison died. He'd known the man, trusted him, followed him into places that existed only in classified after-action reports. "Ma'am, with respect, we need to know we can count on you. This op, it's not standard. It's not even close to standard." "Then it's exactly the kind of mission Jake would have volunteered for," Phoenix replied, her voice steady as granite. She turned toward the operations tent where Colonel Harrison waited with their briefing materials. "Which means it's exactly the kind of mission I'm going to complete." The 4 SEALs fell into step behind her, their initial skepticism beginning to crack under the weight of recognition. This wasn't just another pilot rotating through on a routine support mission. This was someone carrying the ghosts of the dead and the responsibilities of the living in equal measure. The story was about to begin in earnest, and none of them were prepared for where it would take them. Inside the operations tent, Colonel Marcus Harrison looked up from a classified folder thick enough to stop small arms fire. At 52, Harrison had seen more classified operations than most people saw movies, but the expression on his weathered face suggested this one was different. Maps covered every available surface, satellite imagery of mountain ranges that officially didn't exist, marked with red zones that indicated things worse than enemy territory. "Phoenix," Harrison said without preamble, "glad you made it. We're running against a timeline that's already compressed to hell and gone." He gestured to the chairs arranged around a metal table that had seen better decades. "Gentlemen, take a seat. What I'm about to tell you stays in this tent, and if it doesn't, you'll spend the rest of your natural lives in a hole so deep they'll have to pump in sunlight." Phoenix remained standing, her eyes scanning the maps with the automatic assessment of someone who'd spent years turning geography into tactical advantage. "Sir, before we begin, my aircraft is showing stress fractures on the port wing attachment points. I can fly the mission, but I need to know what I'm flying into." "Smart question," Harrison replied, impressed despite himself. "Because what you're flying into isn't supposed to exist, and the people you're flying to extract have been dead for 2 weeks according to their official records." Valdez leaned forward in his chair, his dark eyes narrowing. "Dead how, sir?" Harrison pulled out a series of photographs, satellite imagery timestamped from 14 days prior. The images showed a crashed MH-60 Black Hawk helicopter in a valley surrounded by peaks that scraped the sky at over 15,000 feet elevation. SEAL Team 6 was conducting a joint operation with CIA SAD operatives, hunting a high-value target in the Wakin corridor. Their helicopter went down in a whiteout blizzard during extraction. Search and rescue was called off after 72 hours due to weather and hostile activity in the area. "But they're not dead," Chen stated rather than asked, his voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who'd learned to read between classified lines. "3 days ago, we started receiving intermittent radio transmissions from their emergency beacon," Harrison confirmed. "Someone's still alive down there, and they're asking for immediate extraction. The problem is, their position is in a valley that's impossible to reach by helicopter in current weather conditions, surrounded by peaks that would challenge an experienced mountain climber, and approximately 40 miles behind enemy lines." Phoenix studied the imagery with professional interest, her finger tracing flight patterns across the topographical lines. "What's the ceiling on those peaks?" 17,000 feet at the lowest practical approach vector," Harrison replied. "Your Super Hornet has a service ceiling of 50,000 but landing. That's another story entirely." "I'm not planning to land," Phoenix said quietly, still studying the maps. "I'm planning to extract them, What's the payload requirement? O'Brien, who'd been unusually quiet, spoke up. Ma'am, begging your pardon, but how exactly do you extract personnel from a mountain valley with a fighter jet? Phoenix looked up from the maps, and for the first time since landing, she smiled. It wasn't a particularly warm smile. Very carefully, Sergeant, and with equipment that officially doesn't exist either. The tent fell silent except for the distant sound of rotor blades as another helicopter lifted off from the base. Harrison watched Phoenix with growing respect and growing concern in equal measure. Harrison opened another classified folder, this one marked with red tape and warning labels that suggested its contents could start wars. Phoenix, what I'm about to show you is the reason Washington specifically requested you for this mission. It's also the reason that, if this goes sideways, none of us ever existed. He spread out technical drawings that looked like they'd been designed by someone with a background in both aerospace engineering and creative insanity. The schematics showed modifications to an FA-18F Super Hornet, external hardpoints reconfigured not for weapons, but for personnel extraction pods that resembled nothing so much as armored cocoons. Project Valkyrie, Harrison continued. Experimental extraction system designed for special operations in denied territory. Each pod can carry one person and has its own life support, stabilization gyros, and emergency parachute. The system has been tested exactly once, 6 months ago over the Nevada desert, with a volunteer test pilot who shall remain nameless. Phoenix's eyes widened fractionally as she recognized the test data signatures in the margins. Sir, this is my flight data. Which is why you're here, Harrison confirmed. You're the only pilot who's actually used this system in anything approaching operational conditions. The question is, can you do it again, at altitude, in combat conditions, with 4 lives depending on your ability to thread the needle between 17,000-foot peaks in weather that's currently grounding every helicopter within 300 miles? Williams, the team medic, leaned forward to study the pod specifications. Sir, these life support systems, how long do they last? 45 minutes from activation, Harrison replied grimly. Which means Phoenix has exactly 45 minutes from the moment she drops into that valley to locate survivors, load them into the pods, and get them back to minimum safe altitude for ejection. And if the weather doesn't cooperate, Valdez asked. Then we write letters to families explaining how their loved ones died in training accidents, Harrison said bluntly. Because this mission never happened, and if it did, it certainly didn't happen in the Wacken corridor. Phoenix continued studying the technical specifications, her mind automatically calculating fuel consumption, flight time, and extraction probabilities. The mathematics of the mission were brutally simple. Everything had to work perfectly or everyone died. Sir, what's the current weather window? 6 hours, maybe 8 if we're lucky. After that, the storm front moves in from the northwest and locks down the entire region for another week minimum. Harrison's voice carried the weight of deadline pressure, which brings us to the real problem. He pulled out the final set of photographs, these ones taken by satellite in the past 48 hours. The images showed movement around the crash site, figures in white winter gear surrounding the downed helicopter, setting up positions that looked distinctly like a siege. Hostile forces have located the crash site, Harrison continued. Intelligence suggests they're keeping the survivors alive for intelligence purposes, but that situation won't last forever. We have reason to believe they're planning to move the prisoners within 24 hours. Chen studied the enemy positions with professional interest. Sir, how many hostiles are we looking at? Minimum 12, probably more. And they're not locals. These are trained operators with military equipment and winter warfare capability. Harrison's expression darkened, which means this extraction just became a combat rescue. The weight of the mission settled over the tent like a physical presence. Phoenix looked up from the schematics, her green eyes reflecting a decision that had already been made. "Gentlemen, I need to ask you something, and I need honest answers. Are you willing to trust your lives to a pilot you've never worked with, using equipment that barely exists, on a mission that officially isn't happening?" The four SEALs exchanged glances, the kind of wordless communication that came from years of operation where trust was the difference between coming home and becoming a classified casualty statistic. Valdez spoke for all of them. "Ma'am, we've trusted our lives to worse odds for better reasons, and if Ghost Rider vouched for you, that's good enough for us." Phoenix nodded slowly, accepting the weight of their confidence. "Then let's go bring our people home." Outside the tent, storm clouds gathered on the horizon like an approaching army, and time continued its merciless countdown toward a mission that would test every skill any of them had ever learned. The hangar echoed with the controlled chaos of mission preparation as Phoenix conducted her pre-flight inspection with the methodical precision of someone who knew that overlooked details killed people. The modified Super Hornet sat under harsh fluorescent lights, its standard weapons hardpoints replaced by the sleek, ominous pods that would either save 4 lives or become their coffins. "Phoenix," Chief Petty Officer Maria Santos called from beneath the aircraft's starboard wing. Santos was the senior crew chief responsible for the Valkyrie modifications, and her reputation for perfectionism was legendary even among naval aviators who considered perfectionism a survival requirement. "I've run diagnostics on all 4 pods 3 times. Life support is green across the board, gyro systems are calibrated, and emergency chutes are packed according to specifications." "What about the mounting systems?" Phoenix asked, running her hands along the pod attachment points with the careful attention of someone whose life would depend on those connections remaining secure during high-G maneuvers. "Rated for 12 GS, tested to 15, Santos replied. "But ma'am, I need to be honest with you. This system was designed for test conditions, not combat operations. You're going to be flying into mountains in weather that's already grounding aircraft with twice the margin for error." Phoenix appreciated the candor. In her experience, crew chiefs who sugar-coated problems were crew chiefs who got pilots killed. "Chief, in your professional opinion, will this equipment do what we need it to do?" Santos emerged from beneath the wing, wiping her hands on a rag that had seen better decades. At 45, she'd been maintaining naval aircraft longer than Phoenix had been flying them, and her opinion carried the weight of experience earned in hangars across 3 theaters of operations. "Ma'am, this equipment will work exactly as designed, assuming the pilot flying it is good enough to thread the needle between what's possible and what's suicidal." She paused, studying Phoenix with the assessing gaze of someone who'd watched too many young pilots learn hard lessons about the difference between confidence and competence. "Question is, are you that good?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Phoenix had been asking herself the same thing since Harrison briefed the mission parameters. Flying into a mountain valley in deteriorating weather conditions to extract personnel from a hostile environment pushed every limitation of aircraft performance and pilot skill. Adding untested equipment to the equation moved the mission from dangerous into something approaching experimental. "I guess we're about to find out," Phoenix replied finally. It wasn't bravado. It was the simple acknowledgement that some questions could only be answered under operational conditions. Across the hangar, the 4 SEALs were conducting their own preparations with the quiet efficiency that marked professional operators. Each man carried equipment selected for a mission profile that existed nowhere in official doctrine: mountain warfare gear combined with high-altitude survival equipment, weapons configured for close-quarters combat in sub-zero conditions, and communication systems designed to function in terrain that turned radio waves into prayers. Valdez approached Phoenix as she completed her inspection of the pod mounting systems. "Ma'am, we've been talking, and we wanted you to know, whatever happens up there, we understand the risks. This mission, It's the kind of operation Jake Morrison would have run himself if he'd still been breathing. The mention of Morrison's name hit Phoenix like a physical blow. She'd spent 3 years trying to escape the shadow of that night in Helmand Province, but here, preparing for another impossible mission, his presence felt as real as the cold metal of her aircraft. "Valdez," she said quietly, "I need you to understand something. What happened to Morrison, what happened to all of us that night, it's going to be with me every second we're up there. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It means I won't make the same mistakes twice." "What mistakes were those, ma'am?" Phoenix was quiet for a long moment, her eyes focused on something beyond the hangar walls. "I trusted the weather report." The weight of that admission settled over the group like a classified briefing. Weather had killed more military pilots than enemy action, and everyone in the hangar knew it. The difference between survival and catastrophe often came down to a pilot's ability to read conditions that meteorologists could only guess at from hundreds of miles away. William stepped forward, his medical bag slung over his shoulder and his expression serious. "Ma'am, I need to ask, how's your medical status? Any issues with altitude, G-forces, or extended flight operations?" It was a professional question, but Phoenix heard the concern underneath it. These men were trusting their lives to her ability to function under physical stresses that pushed human endurance to its limits. Clean bill of health as of last month. No medications, no medical conditions that affect performance. I've logged over 3,000 hours in the Super Hornet, including 400 hours of combat operations. She paused. I also logged 18 hours of flight time in the past, 36 hours getting here, which means I'm running on caffeine and determination. "That's what we figured," O'Brien said with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hell, ma'am, half our best operations were run on caffeine and determination. Other half were run on caffeine and spite." The humor was forced, but it served its purpose, breaking tension that was building toward something unproductive. Phoenix appreciated the effort. "Speaking of caffeine," she said, "Chief Santos, is there still coffee in the operations tent?" "Yes, ma'am, but I wouldn't recommend it. That pot's been brewing since yesterday, and it's achieved something approaching tactical viscosity." "Perfect," Phoenix replied. "If I can drink Navy coffee, I can fly anything." It was time to go. The radio transmission crackled through the operations tent, with the distinctive quality of signals bounced through atmospheric interference and encryption protocols. Colonel Harrison adjusted the frequency manually, his weathered fingers working dials that had guided more classified operations than most people knew existed. "Overlord, this is Broken Arrow 6. The voice carried exhaustion, pain, and the kind of controlled desperation that came from watching time run out in real time. "We have 4 souls remaining, 2 wounded, all mobile. Enemy forces have established overwatch positions on our location. Request immediate extraction, over." Harrison keyed the microphone, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was about to commit to. "Broken Arrow 6, this is Overlord. Extraction is inbound. Phoenix flight, ETA 30 minutes. Hold your position and maintain radio discipline. We're coming to get you, over." "Copy, Overlord. Be advised, weather is deteriorating rapidly. Visibility dropping, wind speed increasing. Window is closing fast, over." "Understood, Broken Arrow 6. Phoenix flight is equipped for adverse weather operations. Keep your heads down and stay alive. Overlord out." Harrison set down the microphone and looked at the assembled group. Phoenix stood beside her flight helmet, already dressed in full survival gear that added bulk to her frame, but couldn't hide the controlled tension in her posture. The 4 SEALs had completed their equipment checks and stood ready for a mission that pushed every boundary of what was tactically possible. "Phoenix," Harrison said, "you're cleared for immediate departure. Rules of engagement are simple. Get our people out of there by any means necessary. You have authorization for weapons free in defense of the extraction. Weather window is closing fast and we won't get another chance at this. Phoenix nodded, pulling on her flight gloves with movements that had become automatic after thousands of hours in the cockpit. Understood, sir. If we're not back in 3 hours, assume mission failure and initiate whatever cover story keeps this out of the newspapers. That won't be necessary, Harrison replied with more confidence than he felt. You're going to bring them home. The 5-person team moved across the tarmac with purpose, their boots ringing against concrete still warm from the afternoon sun. Phoenix climbed into her aircraft while the SEALs conducted final checks of their extraction pods, cramped spaces that would become their entire world for the next hour of flight time. "Gentlemen," Phoenix said over the intercom as her engine spooled up, "welcome to Phoenix Airlines. Please ensure your seats are in the upright and locked position, because we're about to find out what this equipment was really designed for." Valdez, already sealed into his pod, keyed his radio. "Phoenix Reaper, we're secure and ready for departure." "Dragon, locked and loaded," Chen reported from his pod, his voice carrying the calm professionalism of someone who'd learned to treat mortal danger as a routine occupational hazard. "Wrench, ready to rock," O'Brien confirmed, his Boston accent somehow making even the most serious situation sound slightly comedic. "Prophet, ready for extraction," Williams said simply, his medical training already focused on what he'd need to do for wounded personnel once they reached the crash site. Phoenix ran through her final pre-flight checks with mechanical precision, each switch and gauge confirming that her aircraft was ready for a mission that would test every system to its operational limits. The Super Hornet's twin engines generated the kind of power that could push 50,000 pounds of aircraft and equipment to speeds approaching twice the speed of sound. But power meant nothing without the skill to use it precisely. "Tower, this is Phoenix Flight requesting immediate departure clearance for classified operations." "Phoenix Flight Tower, you are cleared for takeoff runway 27, good hunting." The aircraft rolled forward, gathering speed as thousands of pounds of thrust pushed it toward the critical velocity where wings would generate enough lift to defy gravity. Phoenix felt the familiar sensation of acceleration pressing her back into her ejection seat, followed by the moment of transition when the Super Hornet left the ground and became what it was designed to be, a precision weapon capable of delivering devastating force anywhere on the planet. But today, instead of carrying weapons toward a target, she was carrying 4 men toward a rescue mission that would require every skill any of them had ever learned. The mountains appeared on the horizon like jagged teeth, against a sky that promised nothing but trouble. At 25,000 feet, the world looked deceptively peaceful. Phoenix adjusted her course slightly to account for upper atmosphere winds that could push her aircraft off target by miles if left uncorrected, while monitoring weather reports that grew more ominous with each update. The storm front approaching the target area wasn't just bad weather. It was the kind of mountain storm system that could down aircraft and kill experienced crews through sheer atmospheric violence. "Phoenix, this is Reaper," Valdez's voice crackled through the intercom. "How's our time looking?" "Tight," Phoenix replied, checking her navigation display. "Weather's moving in faster than forecast. We'll have maybe 20 minutes on station before conditions become unworkable." She paused, running calculations that balanced fuel consumption against extraction requirements. "Once we're committed to the descent, there's no going back. If something goes wrong down there, we won't have enough fuel for a second attempt." "Understood," Valdez replied. "What's the plan once we reach the crash site?" Phoenix had been working on that question since takeoff, gaming out scenarios that accounted for everything from hostile fire to mechanical failures. The rescue plan was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its precision requirements. "I'll make a low pass to assess the situation and identify survivors. Then I'll set down the pods approximately 100 meters from the crash site. You'll have 15 minutes to reach the survivors, load them into the pods, and get back to extraction position." What about hostile forces? Chen asked from his pod, his communication equipment already scanning for enemy radio transmissions. I'll provide close air support as needed, Phoenix said, her voice carrying the flat certainty of someone who'd made peace with whatever violence might be necessary. The Super Hornet carries a 20-millimeter cannon with 578 rounds. Should be enough to discourage most forms of bad behavior. O'Brien's voice carried grim humor. Ma'am, in my experience, people shooting at SEALs require significant discouragement. Then they'll get it, Phoenix replied. The target area appeared on her navigation display as a red circle surrounded by topographical lines that indicated terrain capable of killing the unwary. Phoenix began her descent from cruising altitude, feeling the aircraft respond to control inputs with the precision that had made the Super Hornet the Navy's primary strike fighter for over 2 decades. Phoenix, this is Broken Arrow 6, the radio crackled with increasing urgency. Enemy forces are moving toward our position. Estimate 15 minutes before they reach our perimeter. We need that extraction now. Phoenix pushed her engines to military power, trading fuel consumption for speed in a calculation that left no margin for error. Broken Arrow 6, this is Phoenix. ETA 8 minutes. Keep your heads down and be ready to move fast when we arrive. Copy, Phoenix, we'll be ready. The mountains rushed toward them like a wall of granite and snow, their peaks disappearing into cloud formations that promised turbulence, ice, and visibility reduced to mere feet. Phoenix adjusted her approach vector, threading between peaks that rose above 15,000 feet on both sides of her aircraft. Gentlemen, she said over the intercom, we're beginning our descent into the target area. From this point forward, anything can happen. Stay alert, follow orders, and remember, we're bringing everyone home. The Super Hornet plunged toward the valley floor like a controlled missile, carrying 5 people toward a rescue mission that would test everything they thought they knew about courage, skill, and the thin line between success and disaster. Below them, 4 Americans waited in the snow, counting minutes until either salvation or death arrived from the sky. The valley opened beneath them like a wound carved into the mountain face, its snow-covered floor marked by the dark scar of wreckage that had once been a state-of-the-art military helicopter. Phoenix dropped the Super Hornet to 500 feet above ground level, its engines echoing off granite walls that rose almost vertically on both sides. The crashed MH-60 Black Hawk lay tilted against a boulder formation, its rotors twisted into abstract sculpture by forces that had overcome engineering and luck in equal measure. Visual on the crash site, Phoenix reported, her eyes scanning for signs of life while her hands maintained the precise control inputs necessary to keep her aircraft stable in the turbulent air that filled the valley like an invisible river. I count 4 figures in winter gear, approximately 50 meters northeast of the wreckage. They appear mobile. Phoenix, this is Broken Arrow 6, the radio transmission carried desperate relief. We have visual on your aircraft. Be advised, enemy forces are in overwatch positions on the ridgelines, approximately 200 meters to our south and east. They have not engaged but were effectively pinned down. Phoenix banked her aircraft slightly, using her targeting systems to locate the hostile positions mentioned by the survivors. Through her heads-up display, she could see muzzle flashes and movement among the rocks that indicated a well-prepared enemy force with tactical advantage and sufficient firepower to make any rescue attempt extremely dangerous. Reaper, you seeing what I'm seeing? Phoenix asked over the intercom. Valdez's voice carried the calm assessment of someone who'd learned to evaluate threats as casually as most people checked the weather. Copy, Phoenix. I count at least 12 hostiles in prepared positions with automatic weapons and what looks like a heavy machine gun or light mortar. They've got excellent fields of fire covering the crash site. Which means we do this fast and violent, Phoenix replied, her voice carrying the kind of professional coldness that came from accepting the reality of combat operations. "I'm going to make a gun run on the eastern ridge to suppress hostile fire, then drop you as close to the survivors as possible. You'll have maybe 10 minutes before they regroup and counterattack." Williams, monitoring his medical equipment from within his pod, spoke up. "Phoenix, any assessment on casualty status of the survivors?" "Negative on detailed medical assessment, but they're mobile and responding to radio communications," Phoenix replied, pulling her aircraft into a climbing turn that would set up her attack run. "Broken Arrow 6, this is Phoenix. I'm about to engage hostile positions on your eastern perimeter. When you see my gun run, be ready to move toward the extraction point I'm about to mark." "Copy, Phoenix. We're ready to move on your signal." Phoenix armed her 20mm cannon and selected targeting data for the enemy positions she'd identified during her reconnaissance pass. The M61, a 1 Vulcan cannon, was a precision instrument capable of delivering devastating firepower with surgical accuracy, but using it in close proximity to friendly forces required exactly the kind of flying that separated competent pilots from legends. She rolled the Super Hornet into a diving attack profile, the aircraft's nose pointing toward coordinates that would determine whether 4 Americans lived or died in the next few minutes. Her targeting computer painted hostile positions with red diamonds, each one representing lives that stood between her people and extraction. "Gun run, guns, guns, guns," Phoenix transmitted, squeezing the trigger that unleashed controlled violence at the speed of sound. The cannon fire walked across the eastern ridgeline like deadly rain, each round precisely placed to neutralize threats without endangering the survivors huddled near the crashed helicopter. Rock and snow exploded in fountains of debris as armor-piercing rounds found their targets, silencing positions that had commanded the valley floor moments earlier. "Phoenix, Broken Arrow 6, the radio crackled with renewed hope. "Direct hits on hostile positions. Enemy fire has ceased. We're moving to extraction point now." "Copy, moving to pod deployment," Phoenix replied, pulling her aircraft out of the attack dive and configuring for the most dangerous part of the entire mission, delivering 4 SEALs into a combat zone using equipment that existed nowhere in official military doctrine. The extraction pods released from their hardpoints with mechanical precision, each one following a ballistic trajectory that would place it within running distance of the crash site. Phoenix watched her human cargo descend toward the valley floor under canopies designed to function in atmospheric conditions that challenged both equipment and the men who used it. "Phoenix Reaper," Valdez's voice came through clearly despite the interference of his pod's communication system. "Good drop. We're on the ground and moving toward survivors. ETA to extraction point 8 minutes." "Copy, Reaper. Weather's getting worse. We need to make this happen fast." Below them, 4 SEALs moved across broken ground toward 4 people who had been counting heartbeats instead of time, while above them, a pilot circled like a protective angel with a 20mm cannon and the absolute determination to bring everyone home alive. The clock was running down, and the mountains were closing in. Valdez hit the ground hard, his knees absorbing impact that would have shattered civilian bones, but barely registered to someone who'd spent years learning to fall from aircraft in conditions that ranged from inconvenient to catastrophic. The extraction pod's parachute collapsed behind him as he rolled to his feet, immediately scanning for threats while his team members completed their own landings in a tactical formation that put firepower between the survivors and any remaining hostile forces. "Dragon, Wrench, Prophet, sound off," Valdez commanded, his rifle already up and tracking potential targets among the rocks and snow that surrounded the valley floor. "Dragon, good landing, equipment functional," Chen reported, his communication gear already scanning for enemy transmissions while his eyes searched for movement among the ridgelines. "Wrench on the ground and ready to party," O'Brien confirmed, his demolitions equipment secure and his weapon ready for whatever violence might be necessary in the next few minutes. Prophet landed and moving toward casualties, Williams said, his medical training already focused on the four figures struggling through deep snow toward their position. The survivors looked like walking ghosts, hollow-eyed, frostbitten, and moving with the careful precision of people who'd learned that every step might be their last. As they approached, Valdez could see details that radio transmissions hadn't conveyed. One man supporting another who clearly had a leg injury, a woman whose left arm hung useless at her side, and a fourth figure whose movements suggested internal injuries that required immediate medical attention. Broken Arrow 6, this is Reaper, Valdez transmitted. We have visual on all four survivors. What's your medical status? The lead figure raised a hand in acknowledgement, his voice carrying exhaustion that went bone deep. Reaper, Broken Arrow 6, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, Team 6. We have 2 walking wounded, 1 possible internal bleeding and 1 compound fracture. We can all move, but we need medical attention as soon as possible. Williams was already moving toward the injured personnel, his medical bag open and his training taking over. In the field, Navy corpsmen were expected to perform miracles with minimal equipment under maximum stress, and Prophet had earned his call sign by predicting medical outcomes that defied conventional wisdom. Phoenix, this is Reaper, Valdez reported to their extraction pilot. We have 4 survivors, 2 requiring immediate medical attention. Prophet is assessing now. ETA to extraction point 6 minutes. Phoenix's voice crackled through atmospheric interference that was getting worse by the minute. Copy, Reaper. Weather's deteriorating faster than forecast. I'm reading wind speeds approaching 40 knots with visibility dropping below minimums for extraction operations. We need to make this happen now. O'Brien, who'd been monitoring the surrounding terrain for signs of hostile activity, suddenly stiffened and raised his weapon. Contact, 2 o'clock, approximately 300 meters. I count 6 figures moving down from the western ridge. Valdez followed O'Brien's sight line and confirmed the sighting. Enemy forces that had survived Phoenix's gun run were attempting to flank their position, moving with tactical discipline that suggested professional training and serious intent. Phoenix, we have hostiles maneuvering on our position. Request immediate close air support. On the way, Phoenix replied, her voice carrying the